While Star Trek as a series has expressed a number of consistent themes, each individual Star Trek series has its own unique worldview. Originally, I thought I might do one huge video that tackles them all, but honestly, there's just a bit too much to say, so I thought I would start slow and just lay out the base assumptions that I believe drive the storytelling and values of the original series. So let's just get into it. Something that's really unique about the original series, especially in relation to basically every other Star Trek series, is just how much an afterthought Earth itself is. Nothing happening on Earth affects the heroes, and virtually nothing that the heroes do affects Earth, with some exceptions. Our earthly, human, historical problems simply aren't problems anymore. We never really get a good picture of what life on Earth is like in the original series, but we do get the sense that pretty much everything that humanity is facing is on the final frontier. But we would get some hints about life on Earth, because while the writers of Star Trek envisioned an inevitable World War III, we have every indication that humanity would not only survive our modern high-tension issues, but would in fact thrive. Humanity's best and brightest in the future would also represent the entire globe, giving a promise of a future long-term international peace, the likes of which our modern audience has never known. In the series, we never get a sense of how this happens on Earth, but we do know that Star Trek generally opposes get Utopia quick schemes. In fact, Star Trek seems to oppose the very notion of utopia, whether it's governmental, technological, or chemically induced. The results are invariably disastrous and fundamentally damaging to human flourishing, regardless of intent.
Maybe we weren't meant for paradise. Maybe we were meant to fight our way through, struggle, claw our way up.
So we can confidently say that the state of humanity wouldn't be described as some utopic paradise by the creators of Star Trek at the time. It seems that humanity in the future is much the same as humanity of the present, except for the fact that mankind has somehow managed to achieve global peace and cooperation. But that future that Star Trek presents is couched in the assurance that in pursuing global cooperation, we won't descend into some dystopian nightmare or lose the things that make us unique as people. Ultimately, the fears of assimilation and homogenization would be more pointedly addressed with the Borg in the Next Generation, but the original series touched on this too in a subtle sense. Star Trek from the very beginning was a strongly individualistic show. The Enterprise isn't some kind of collective where people are blended together. It's a forum for individuals with their own backgrounds to come together around the shared value that everyone is an individual with his own background. And the characters in Star Trek actively celebrate their own differences, taking pride in heritages that they didn't need to abandon in order to cooperate with others. And banter about these differences is taken in stride because,
see, in our century, we've learned not to fear words.
And while every character has a strong cultural identity, nobody is treated like some kind of representative, whether good or bad. For instance, Chekhov isn't a figurehead to bash Russians to blow off some Cold War era steam. This is true even for the villains of the show, who are all distinct individuals with their own personalities and motivations. Every individual is his own man and is judged purely on his own merits as a person. And that kind of brings me to human growth and accomplishment in Star Trek. The future of the original Star Trek is a very human future, where mankind has not allowed itself to be overtaken by its own technological accomplishments. Humanity has intentionally put itself on a path where, despite complex automation and quite a bit of progress in computing, humans themselves undertake virtually all the labor and make all the decisions. And we see this demonstrated by the fact that Starfleet has a conspicuous lack of robots, for instance. And that's by design. It's not like the creators of the series would have had robots everywhere if they just had the budget. Robots are a seemingly terrifying prospect to the original Star Trek because they represent a threat to human autonomy. The only times that we see the heroes encounter robots or supercomputers, these things are villains. If some robot or computer is infringing on the duties of a human, there's something wrong. And this general mentality is clearly one of the most sacred values of the series, with the heroes often going out of their way to destroy the technological overlords of other cultures. Freedom and self-determination are supreme, even if it means taking drastic interventionist action. Technology is a tool that is only appropriate within a very narrow range of uses, and apparently allowing technology to creep outside these barriers brings enormous risk, and must be rectified whenever encountered. Man must do his own work and make his own decisions. Which brings us to what is perhaps the biggest ideological element of the original Star Trek, the constant discourse between emotional sensibilities and objective reason, and how properly balanced human intuition can synthesize and make use of both to come to informed and moral decisions. We get this discourse in nearly every episode of the series, manifest in our protagonist triumvirate of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Spock and McCoy are almost always in moral conflict with one another. Though they are clearly good friends and both heroes, their commitments often put them on opposing sides for almost any given issue. Spock, as the ship's science officer, is committed to a morality based on what seems most logical, favoring efficiency and strict adherence to established structures, whereas McCoy, as the ship's healer, is committed to doing what seems most moral based on his emotional sensibilities. But too extreme a commitment in either direction can often result in the wrong conclusion, or at the very least, constant conflict. It is Kirk who stands between these two, and in his duties as captain, he is committed to synthesizing both the practical and the emotional concerns of any scenario to do what is ultimately moral. Spock and McCoy are often both correct and wrong simultaneously. Kirk embodies ideal balance. He isn't an absolutely perfect person, but he is capable of gentleness and aggression, familiarity and detachment, and he can balance the utilitarianism of Spock with the compassion of McCoy. And this makes Kirk perhaps the ideal leader. It's not that every solution is a balance of the two, but every solution requires a balanced person who can weigh the concerns and come to the correct conclusion. Simply put, sometimes the solution is to destroy the enemy, and sometimes the solution is to find some kind of understanding. And an ideal person will thoughtfully consider both and wisely make the correct decision. And that is perhaps the biggest message of the series, that perhaps humanity can better itself not through external governmental systems or by shrugging off its moral duties onto technological advancements, but by behaving a bit more like Captain Kirk, embracing both logic and emotion where appropriate, and using a balanced and well-informed approach to distill these positions into a moral solution. I hope you enjoyed this little analysis of the core themes of the original Star Trek. In some sense, Star Trek owes its enduring popularity by being all things to all people, so it's very possible that you have a different perception of what constitute the core themes of the original series. And if that's the case, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.